have Dr. Simon Batchelor from the UK, from MECS, Modern Energy Cooking Services Program. There he is a coordinator for UK Research and Innovation. We have Dr. Nitin Labhasetwar, Chief Scientist and Head at CSIR NEDI under the Energy and Resource Management Division. And we have our host, Manoj Kumar, who is the co-founder and CEO of Social Alpha. Thank you once again for spending time today. And let me now jump into the questions. I would also like to remind the audience that feel free to keep sharing questions on the chat box throughout the session. With the help of Smita, we will curate the questions and bring forth to the panels as we go ahead with the conversations. So let me start with Priyadarshini, a question to you. So I fortunately, as I mentioned, the conversation has moved beyond cook stoves, is focusing on cooking solutions, clean cooking solutions, and over the year, and you have been a strong advocate in this space. So any thoughts on how the future of clean cooking will look at for the rural communities, especially looking at health and climate change?
Yeah, thank you, Adwait, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me on this panel. It's actually quite exciting for me to see that there is a challenge which is firstly allowing a wide variety of technologies to compete against each other, and secondly, it's also providing an incentive for looking at users' perspective and user satisfaction. My vision of the future is that the cooking energy sector that will be free of the caste system of energy sources for cooking. We need a technology and fuel agnostic approach, which will be focused only on the desired outcome. Does a cooking energy system deliver user satisfaction while being pollution free and climate friendly? And I use the phrase cooking energy system rather than cook stove here, because it's not just about the stove. The stove is an important part of it, but then it has to trigger other things. It's the stove, the fuel, the cooking vessels, the kitchen architecture. Also, there are no universal solutions. That's another aspect of it, which I think should be highlighted. The best solution will vary based on the cultural and geographical context. There is this perception that LPG is a universal solution, but it is not if you look at the technology perspective. For example, a European household that needs to do a lot of baking requires an oven, which is an entirely different appliance than a simple cooktop. So even with LPG and electricity, there are no universal technology solutions, and that's the case with other stove technologies also. So a wide variety of solutions can coexist for different socio-cultural groups and for different geographies. With this logic, I think we also need to start moving away from the assumption that we need different approaches for rural and urban kitchens. After all, if we really want this sector to be up there in the fight against climate change, then it's high time we started exploring options for LPG, which is a petroleum-based cooking fuel. So the last word hasn't been said even as far as urban kitchens are concerned. And ultimately, it is actually a bit of a I think wrong to say that we need different solutions in rural context and urban context. So I hope that this challenge is the start of moving this sector to embracing these new defining principles rather than getting lost in the highly flawed energy ladder approach, which assumes that you give everyone LPG stoves or electric stoves and that's the end of the story. Ownership of a so-called clean cook stove means nothing unless people actually shift away from polluting cooking practices. And that shift will happen only if the clean cook stove is providing all the household thermal energy services that the users need in a way that they feel most comfortable with. So I feel that the future hopefully is that the cooking energy sector will rebuild itself on these new principles, taking the learnings from the past, mostly failures, towards better successes. That's my perception.
Mic needs. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Priyadarshini. I think definitely a big insight, and I think this has been a push for from Clean as well as yourself on making sure that the choice of fuel or choice of technology remains back with the consumer than us thinking about it. And I'm sure entrepreneurs in the audience will look at that as an important aspect when they develop their business models or so. Let me come back, come to Dr. Professor Ambuj for a quick comment. We were earlier speaking when you mentioned an interesting aspect. So you mentioned that it is difficult for entrepreneurs to influence policy individually, right? Whereas a policy can play a big role in influencing an entrepreneur's business model and the way they look at this ecosystem. So, from a policy perspective, would you like to share, how you see the future of policy will come to be in this particular sector? Dr. Ambuj?
Yes. Hi, Adwait. Thank you very much for having me here, actually, the organizers. Adwait, I'm sorry, I actually cannot answer your question because I cannot tell the future of policy. Unfortunately, I wish I could, but I can't. And I think what that means for the entrepreneurs is that you cannot depend on policy to provide you particular kinds of support that's needed in order to take the solutions forward. Right? I mean, I think we've seen a gradual evolution of policy towards the recognition of the importance of clean cooking energy for even the poorer in rural households. I think we've seen that. I think and a lot of it has been driven by an understanding of the fact that dirty biomass combustion, which is the standard, has been the traditional way of providing energy in the past, has huge health impacts. So effectively, I think, as mentioned earlier, this is not really an energy problem by itself. It's actually a health problem, first and foremost, where people need energy services. But I think the policy evolution has been that we are recognizing that those solutions have to be provided so as to adequately protect human health of the people, the most exposed, which are mostly women and children in rural areas. I think that sets up an important question then for the entrepreneurs, is how do you move forward when you don't know what the policy future is going to look like? And ideally, that becomes a very tricky question, because if you want, in a sense, the solution to be disseminated without depending on policy, it has to be a solution that actually can be then disseminated by the markets for the poor, which is basically taking into account their buying power and their economic kind of ability. And that's what makes it really tricky, right? You're talking about a high performance solution which is supposed to provide cooking energy services in a manner that actually protects their health, and yet to do it at a cost and operating, both capital and operating cost, that is low enough to be borne by poor people. And you're doing it in competition with an existing solution, which is dirty biomass, which is often seen actually by the users as not having a big cost, because for them, the time in putting together all the biomass and the health cost is not immediately obvious to them. So that's what makes it a really tricky challenge, right? One hopes that in the future, policy is actually going to become more and more responsive, but there also it becomes a difficult challenge. If you take the LPG, which has become a kind of a big push recently, you can actually provide access to people to the cook stoves. But the cost of the LPG on a recurring basis is not insignificant. And there's just so much policy can do to take care of those costs. So even if policy actually is supportive towards driving clean cooking solutions, at some point, there's a limit to what policy can do just because of financial ramifications. And so all that is to say that I think one can imagine that policy is going to continue to hopefully be more supportive of driving the solutions. We don't know in which particular way. We do know there are some limits to what policy can do. I mean, in the case of LPG, for example, the limit to subsidies that they can get. And therefore, I think what that means for the challenge is that cost becomes a paramount question while taking care of the health. And that is really the sweet spot. I'll just stop at that.
Great, interesting. So I think what I heard is that the policy aspect is influential, yes, the way it can open up markets, but at the end, the entrepreneur needs to look at other values that they can create for the ecosystem beyond just policy, right? Or depending on policy. In fact, let me jump to Manoj in this case. Manoj, earlier on when we were just chatting, you did mention that finance does play an important role across not just clean cooking, but any other business that you see. And we have quite a few number of entrepreneurs out there in the audience right now. You mentioned an interesting aspect of how innovative financing can play a role for many of our clean cooking entrepreneurs to think differently in terms of how they make their solutions affordable and probably get access to better finance. Would you like to share a comment on it, and then probably also related to how Social Alpha through this challenge, through the BIRAC challenge, is looking at supporting clean cooking systems?
Thank you, Adwait, and thanks for inviting me for this panel. See, when we talk about solution, actually what I have seen in past, and I have very little experience in this sector, that it's actually the product push and not solution, right? So you design something and then you get some funding for doing a pilot, and then you want everybody to adopt to it. So the strategy has always been product push, right? And we have seen very few entrepreneurs, not just in this space, but across new market creations, that they expect that somebody would fund the pilot and then they will get the scale automatically. Unfortunately, this whole perception of rural or poor consumer is entirely wrong. It doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor, or your purchasing power is high or low. Whatever is your income and whatever is your purchasing power, you want value for that, right? So when we demonstrate value to a potential consumer of our solution, that value is not just the technology or carbon emission, right? Or the intensity of the flame. That value is also the user experience, the value is also the pricing, the value is also whether you have done anything to make it affordable for me. So while subsidy is definitely one part of the jigsaw puzzle that can enhance value, we have to be a little creative in making it sometimes affordable, meeting the cash flows of the consumer, right? I'll give you an example from mainstream telecom world. When mobile telephony came to India, it used to be extremely expensive, 20 rupees incoming, 40 rupees outgoing call and all that. So Indian entrepreneurs invented what we call now prepaid, right? And structured the pricing over a period of time in such a way that every mobile phone user, depending upon her or his need, ability and purchasing power and the solution they were looking for, could buy, whether it's a 10 rupee recharge or 20 rupees recharge, right? And as the prices dropped, telecom industry has very successfully created an extremely flexible model of pricing that enhances the value of mobile telephony. Everybody wanted to use it, but they made it affordable and accessible for everybody, right? And people are intelligent enough to understand every complex pricing algorithm when they go into this this selection of the solution that they want, right? Same, I'm not equating this space, but I'm saying that if I have a solution that nobody wants to use or nobody wants to value, then I cannot really call it a solution. We are just, we have our hypothesis that we converted into a hardware product and we are pushing it to the community, right? So I think this whole approach in this challenge as well, as the entrepreneurs build solutions, they need to continuously focus on, is there someone out there who values this as a solution, right? Whether you use design thinking for that, or use innovative finance for that, or use material science for that, right? But what is required at the end is a value creating model. I'll take a pause there. Maybe we can revisit it later.
Great. So twice we have heard that what value the product brings out is what will how entrepreneurs need to model their businesses around. So that's great to hear. Let me come to Dr. Simon Batchelor to understand your experiences at MECS in terms of the Indian markets, specifically in terms of electric and solar cooking, and again correlating it with from the consumer's mindset or point of view as well. Simon, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. Okay. Yes, Simon.
Sorry. So I love being on a panel when you can build on what the previous speakers have said. So I'm going to start with systems view because the whole Modern Energy Cooking Services program was predicated on the idea that we have a discussion about clean cooking over here in this room, and we have a discussion about electricity in this room. And over the last 30 years, barely have those conversations happened in the same place. And yet, when you're a consumer in the rural area, we know that India has made tremendous gains in rolling out grid electrification. I should just say that we are focused very much on Africa and the poorer parts of Asia. But nevertheless, we're very excited to join with BIRAC in this call because we think that there are solutions that will come up through entrepreneurs here that can really be exported to other locations. And so there are other markets. Excuse me. It's always the case when you're then asked to talk, that's the moment you get a frog in your throat. Our program is very much, there has been a lot of work in improved cook stoves. There is a feeling that people are reliant on biomass, and I frame it that way because for us in Africa, we have situations where if you take a situation like Uganda, they have surplus electricity now. They've invested in generating capacity, and they have connections in urban locations. Now, I know that we're talking rural India here, but in Africa, in urban locations, they have connection. And so you have the crazy situation that in Kampala, you have 95% of households connected, and yet you have 70% still cooking on charcoal. And it's a relatively easy solution to swap that out with an energy efficient electrical appliance. And I do emphasize the energy efficient. Again, the speaker was talking about the cultural acceptance of the way of cooking. At the end of the day, they need a tasty meal, and it's got to taste right. And so what we have done is we've done trials with various electrical appliances in our various countries of interest and shown that actually you can cook a tasty meal with about 1/5 of the cost of charcoal, LPG, kerosene, or even electrical cooking on a hot plate. So we've really latched onto these things called electric pressure cookers. The reason being because those engineers amongst our audience will know that all other fuels require airflow. And in that airflow, you are constrained to have losses. You must have losses. But the great and unique thing about electrical cooking is there is the potential to have no airflow, which means you can actually cook in an insulated environment, and it is temperature that cooks food, not energy. So an electric pressure cooker comes up to pressure, then switches itself off, and then sits there at temperature, carrying on cooking the food. Now, I come back to my tasty meal. In Africa, they do a lot of bean boiling. They do a lot of staples, and like in Uganda, matoke is cooked for 4 hours. So with an electric pressure cooker, you bring that cooking time down to less than an hour for the same taste. So there are opportunities there, and that's what we're interested in BIRAC. You have a wide range of cooking styles within your country. And so are there innovations that can really tackle those different cooking styles and yet build on the world's investment in electricity? Now, we were talking about you can't predict the future and policy. Well, I'm going to take a stab at it. Electricity will be with us for the next 10 years and will grow because most countries are building their policies of electrification, and renewable energy is becoming cheaper and cheaper. So I was introduced as the Modern Energy Cooking Services Program, being interested in electricity and solar. Actually, we're thinking solar PV, charging a battery, cooking. And that has become cost effective in some markets, in some locations. Again, I acknowledge the complexity of the challenge, and we're not saying there's a one-stop for all in one solution. It's about a system view that looks across things. Entrepreneurship, just to build on what Manoj said, yes, it's about co-constructing. There are different solutions for different things. We all have kettles in our house. You can't cook a full meal with a kettle, but it certainly saves an awful lot of time of lighting a charcoal stove just to boil a cup of tea. So, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for new solutions, new ideas that build on existing infrastructure, build on one last statistic. 3 billion people in the world still cook with biomass. Apparently, only 800 million don't have a connection to the electricity supply. That implies that there are 2.2 billion people out there who have electricity but still cook on biomass. Surely we can do something about that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Simon. Let me shift gears a little bit and come to Dr. Nitin Labhasetwar from NIRI. And so, Nitinji, we have Clean and us, NIRI have been working on the emission testing facility that we have set up together, and we are seeing a decent uptake on such testing facilities. Would you like to comment a little bit on how NIRI will be coming into this space to support BIRAC and Social Alpha, and any other thoughts on it from NIRI's point of view?
Well, good afternoon, and thanks, Adwait, Smita, BIRAC, Social Alpha for having me here. First, very briefly commenting on the NIRI's interest in this domain, and obviously that's environmental pollution because it's a national environmental engineering lab. About 7 years ago, we were doing a survey on indoor air quality data, primary data collection, because there was a WHO report and there was a lot of conflicting report about the data on indoor air quality and mortality and morbidity. And then we also tried to validate the data using some source apportionment studies of the ambient air quality data. And all put together, we found it's very complex to interpret the data because there are so many variables when you talk about the rural indoor emission data, because the kitchen size is different, air exchange rate is different. But one thing was sure, that we found a very, very high concentration of PM and CO. Then what we quickly did about 200 household surveys, because NIRI obviously wanted us, what is the solution? Because there are so many things going on. And the user perception during those days, we found that people were asking us that, can you do something for the firewood? Because that is available very cheaply, even the cost of the pallet is unaffordable. And during those days, they said that LPG is either not available or not affordable. That's how we started working on a cook stove called Nitur, which is based on the natural rod and using the firewood. And later on, we in fact came out with a Nitur approach where we have given also some emphasis, rather great emphasis on the exposure, which is often an ignored component. And recently realizing the need of the test facility, because post Ujjwala, there were some issues with the test center. Again, being a national lab, we need to come forward if we can do something. And we joined hands with Clean and IIT Bombay and quickly established a test facility for R&D as well as testing of cook stove based on the PAMS, which is a portable emission monitoring system. Well, coming to the testing issue, especially, I personally feel that under this innovation challenge, probably there could be an even bigger challenge to reliably evaluate the different clean cooking solutions, because it's not going to be easy to compare a natural draft or firewood-based, like mud cook stove with the solar induction or electric cooker. But one good thing is that in India, we definitely need multiple solutions. So I'm sure we are going to promote, this program is going to promote the multiple solution. So at the outset, I would like to say we need to form a small team to work out the test or evaluation protocol. We all understand that a test protocol should be robust enough to reliably evaluate any product or intervention, primarily with respect to achieving its objective or the purpose under very close to real world conditions. In addition to that, we need to look into the durability, which has been a sticky issue when it comes to the cook stove. And you may be aware that there are cook stove which would cost you anything between 1,500 to 3,500 rupees, and that they won't last for more than 3 years at the most, or 4 years. While if you have to buy a stove, LPG stove, which would cost maybe 2,000 rupees, but I remember that lasts about 15 years to 20 years. Okay, so we cannot expect, and as also pointed out by, very rightly pointed by other panelists, we cannot expect a consumer, a rural poor consumer I'm talking about, to expect, the changing his cook stove. Then comes the adoption issue and other related things. Now, restricting to, domestic and community cook stove, which we are into, and we need to find out the, other test protocol for the other devices, for which there are labs which we can easily approach. We have been following like BIS protocol in India, okay? And there are, of course, several merits, it accounts for the vessel dimension, it rely based on the emission, which Ambuj has also pointed out is a major issue when it comes to the rural kitchens, cooking energy. So that has been framed to mainly to compare the different stoves on a similar ground. Okay, but just one example that if you look at the BIS, has a very strict and peculiar test wood specification, which is required for comparing to cook stove. But that kind of a fuel we rarely use in reality. Okay. So around last year, we attended along with Clean and a couple of Priya was there, kind of a star labeling based, test protocol, where we were also discussing about the ISO protocol, which is more internationally acceptable. And it's a pity that in the entire country, we do not have any center which can follow the ISO protocol. And I heard that our entrepreneurs are probably going to Nepal for this ISO protocol. So this is the time where we should come together and look into the BIS, ISO, as well as this star labeling, which gives due cognizance to the heat output, controllability, versatility, in addition to the conventional factors like conventional parameters like thermal efficiency and emission. Okay, so these are the things we need to keep in mind. In fact. So my suggestion for this particular call will be quickly review these three things, BIS, ISO, and star labeling based test protocol, and prepare a test protocol which is more effective in evaluating the potential of a cook stove closer to the real world condition. And I'm happy to see that you have also included limited field-based trials, because MERI has developed that capabilities. And it's a good idea, because in BIS, it's a water boiling test, and water boiling is just one application of household cooking energy in the rural household. Okay, where we can expect the entire energy is going to the vessel, while controlling the flame or cooking any other thing cannot be compared with the water boiling test. So another thing I would like to emphasize on the durability protocol, and a couple of things we can probably pick up from ISO protocol, which I feel is probably a little more sort of give better emphasis on the durability, okay, which has been really an sticky issue. So this is from my side as far as test protocols are concerned. And as I mentioned, there are some protocols already designed for the induction cooker and other devices, which we can follow.
Great. Thank you. I think this blends well into the thoughts that probably entrepreneurs will have when they look at new product development and scaling up their product for market point of view. So there are a couple of questions that are also there through our audiences. I would like to pose one of them to all of you, and maybe at least two of you panelists, if you can chip in, that would be great. So the question is: do you see COVID-19 situation affecting the solutions that will be needed going ahead? Would anybody like to chip in and answer to that?
One.
Yes,
okay.
please, Simon.
No, sorry, Nitin, please jump in.
One quick observation of post-COVID, we were doing some work in the rural areas, okay? And I found that there has been some slippage as far as LPG is concerned under the Ujjwala program. Majority of the people in our areas are on dual fuel mode, which is not bad, okay? Which we should also seriously think. And to them, as the DD's objective is to reduce the emissions and the exposure for the reducing the health burden, we are now advocating them that, okay, if you can afford one cylinder, which you feel should last for 5-6 months, so we advise you to keep your cook stove outside house, okay, and keep it for heating the water or preparing the kettle feed, okay, and try to cook the food inside the kitchen. But post-COVID, we found that they find it even more unaffordable to buy an LPG. And the NGOs we interacted with, they did mention very clearly that, sir, you will find this slippage is going even more severe because of the affordability issue post-COVID, number one. And number two, there was also a discussion under the CLEAN platform that how to deal with the problem of these immigrants, okay, I mean the migrants movement, because they are not interested in any permanent energy solution, okay, and they are quite always using dirty fuels as well as dirty cooking devices. So these are the two things post-COVID I feel are important.
Great, thank you, Nitin. Simon, would you like to chip in?
Well, I just wanted to say that our experience in other countries has been that people have been exploring electric cooking because you don't have to go outside the house to the market to collect the fuel. Many of the poor people collect fuel in very small amounts. And this comes back to Manoj's point about prepaid and innovation in the mobile industry. We purposely named our program Modern Energy Cooking Services because we think there is a moment when utilities are going to, instead of just delivering the end of the wire and say, that's it for me, they're actually going to help manage the consumer's use of that electricity by offering services. Certainly here in Britain, we used to rent our TVs, if we go back far enough. And there's this whole idea that actually you could have a service which you either prepaid, as you said, or postpaid, but through, a standing order. It's all part of your utility bill. So in Kenya, what we are doing is on-bill financing of the initial appliances. Like Dr. Nitin said, it's very important that you get a solid quality appliance. And if you don't spend the money, you end up with a low quality appliance that falls apart. But then the poor reach that price point of the higher quality appliance? Okay, don't ask them to. Put that into their utility bill at an extra $1 or whatever a day. And I think in one of the introductory speeches, he said, the other feature of COVID is that demand for electricity has actually gone down because the factories are shut, the manufacturing is reduced. And many utilities are struggling at the moment. So again, I'm speaking from Africa because I don't know the Indian situation in detail enough. But in terms of Africa, to create that extra consumer demand is helping them pay the utility, the utility to pay back the investment that has been made in generating capacity.
Okay, That's helpful. Maybe I could link this to the next question, and again open for all, but maybe Professor Ambuj or Manoj, if you would like to chip in on this one, is that of course COVID and the future, but in general, as we see that there is the policy landscape itself isn't really mature, as we said. With that as a background, and from the point of view of a startup or an entrepreneur who's working in this particular area, how does he or she optimize their business model in such a dynamic space? Again, the question is open for all, so please feel free to chip in. But Ambuj, you did make that point that the policy landscape is very fluid, and that's where the entrepreneur should not be keeping an eye on in terms of relying on it. But would you like to think about, address the point about business models? How do they balance it? Ambuj, I think you're on mute.
I think probably better if Manoj goes first, and then maybe I'll chip in after that.
Manoj, would you like to go first on this one?
Can you re-articulate, Adwait? I don't think I got the question. Yeah.
Sure. So from the point of view of startups, how do you optimize for the business models in this area?
Yeah.
Even since the policy landscape is immature or dynamic.
Yeah. See, if you are a startup entrepreneur, right, you are basically looking at two things, and you do it from the beginning, right? Number one, you are working in an area where market is still evolving, right? So this is basically a classic case of new market creation, right? You're going to people with a solution that did not exist, but you have a feeling that people wanted it, right? So you are establishing a product market fit as you work with the communities and try to give them a solution and see whether there is any acceptance or adoption. So the two things that you would do, that you want to spend a lot of money, right, in building the perfect solution. You would rather iterate with the users, right, as you build the solution and see what is good enough to go to market, right? I said I'm new to this field, but I did some research. I think thousands of papers have been published on clean cooking, and hundreds of solutions have been pushed to the market. So don't get into that trap. A true entrepreneur will establish the market, create a product market fit, and iteratively develop the product while seeing the adoption. Otherwise, we will end up doing pilots, right? So get out of the pilot trap and build a new market. And the success of the solution would be in adoption and revenue. So don't lose sight of that, right? Otherwise, the old model was get some grant funding, do some pilot, then get some more grant and improve the product, then get some more grant and improve the product, publish another paper, and then get some more grant and publish another paper. Entrepreneurs don't do this. This is not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is build something that people want to aspire for and use it, right? So go out in the field, co-create the solution, test it out, and pivot it, right? Pivot it if it doesn't work, but make something that people want to use. That will automatically create business. The revenue will follow. You don't have to worry about that.
So we keep
just
going
make sure
back
people love it.
to the funnel of end user.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Professor Ambuj, any comments? Anything to add to Manoj?
Let me go back to the policy question that you started with, because I think Manoj is also talking about the business model side of stuff, and he knows, he thinks about it much more than I do, so I don't want to I don't have much to add there. But I think on the policy thing, let me pick up on what Simon said, right? There are, while you can't predict the future, you can actually think about policy trends. And if you look at this COVID, the policy discussion surrounding COVID, I think one of the questions that's being asked is, probably more in the industrialized countries than developing countries, is that as you actually inject stimuli to get the economies rolling, how do you actually do a structural shift towards green? And I think that policy conversation, I don't know where it's going to end up, but that's actually kind of a fairly exciting conversation because it does provide the possible basis for an acceleration of this trend towards renewables that Simon was talking about. And it's not just renewables, there's actually also a parallel shift that's going on towards moving towards clean transportation powered by electric vehicles that is transforming the batteries markets. So in some senses, one can imagine that if you're looking at two technology transformations that are already ongoing and that may well accelerate because of the kind of conversations that are going on now, again, without predicting what the answer will be, because these policy domains, the outcomes are always unpredictable. But if one imagines that there are going to be at least some countries that may push towards that direction, towards accelerating the green transition, then you can actually think about how you might piggyback on the renewables and the battery transitions in order to basically, as I said, piggyback on them in order to develop your solutions, keeping very well in mind the kinds of things that other people have talked about, making sure that you're providing users the kind of experience that's needed and all of that. I do want to actually make one different point. I would caution, I think this prepaid model that was revolutionary in phones is, we have to take that with a pinch of salt in the following way. There you can actually say, I choose or not choose to communicate with people depending on how much money I have, right? You don't have a choice in cooking. You're not going to say, I cook today with electricity for one day, but the rest of the week I'm going to cook with biomass, because if that's the case, your solution has not got the benefit that you want, which is the health benefit. So you have to think about this in really kind of carefully calibrated ways, because in the end, if what is driving your solution, if your objective is a health objective first and foremost, which I think it must be, then your assessment must happen on the basis of that. And in health, you can't say, I'm going to give you clean energy for 20% of the time, but you can actually go back to dirty energy 80% of the time because that health benefit is gone. So if we want this to be driven by health, I think that must be integrated into the entrepreneur's mind is, how do we make sure that that solution then is a solution that is used by the user in preference to everything else that is available to them? And then how do I possibly piggyback off policy trends, not in the clean cooking space, but in other spaces that might help me get there?
Okay, great, thanks. So officially now we are moving into Q&A, while we have taken a few questions from the audience already. But let me take up one more question from the audience to start off that same process once again. And since we are on the topic of user feedback, Priyadarshini, a question towards you is that again, the intuition is that user feedback should be the core part of a product design. Also, you did mention that respecting cultures or balancing diversity in the cultures needs to be incorporated. So how far do you think cultures also evolve when there is a solution for people's betterment? So would you like to answer that? Unmute. Yeah. Priyadarshini, I think you're still unmute. Sorry, muted. Can the moderator unmute?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
The control was not in my hands.
Okay.
So as I was saying, yes, cultures also evolve. I mean, people's eating habits are also evolving. So solutions have to evolve with that. However, and in fact, that has been an important factor in the transition in urban India from biomass or charcoal-based cooking. Charcoal was the fuel of choice for urban India before LPG was introduced. And the shift from charcoal to LPG was not just because LPG is such a beautiful solution, but also because people started eating gehu roti rather than millet roti. Millet roti still doesn't cook very well on an LPG stove. So there are these changes in eating habits that also trigger certain solutions picking up. So that process is also going to happen there. But the important point, and especially in the rural context, is to understand that although we keep on using the word cook stove, it is essentially a thermal energy device in the household, which is providing a variety of thermal energy services. To give a very simple example, is that if you have a rural kitchen which does not have a refrigerator, then the heat which the scientists or technologists consider is you have a clay stove and the stove is heating itself. That is considered as a waste heat. But what is actually happening in the kitchen is that the cooked food is kept on that stove,
Priyadarshini, I think your
and
voice is
that
breaking up.
slow release of heat from the stove is used for preserving the food. So it is not being wasted really. So there are other very simple. Okay, could be some connection issue maybe. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, now
Hello?
it is a little bit fine. Yeah. So what I
Hello?
gather from this is that
Yeah.
probably you will also look at
So
cultural changes to be part of how you modulate the product design.
yeah, so cultural shifts also have to be taken into consideration, and that is exactly why I feel that different socio-economic groups will have different needs, and as they transition across the economic spectrum, their needs will also evolve. So from that perspective, I don't quite agree when people say that all these solutions that we are talking about are interim solutions and there is some ultimate solution that everybody is ultimately going to get to. That's not the case. New solutions will keep on evolving as people transition culturally in eating habits, in their thermal energy requirements, and all sorts of things. So it's going to be an alive field forever, according to me.
Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on that time. So maybe let me come to Manoj. So there are many complex issues that we heard right now. So right from culture to end user expectations to funding to testing, I think very complex issues to put together. How is Social Alpha planning to support entrepreneurs who come with all of these challenges to you? In this challenge,
Okay, that's an existential question for Social Alpha. That's good. so the way we look at promoting entrepreneurship is we start with what problem are you trying to solve, right? And that's our starting point. Then we look at are there people who are also expecting that problem to be solved. So is there an alignment between you think that it's a community problem, but has it been validated by community itself that this problem exists? And third, are you the right person to solve the problem? Right? Do you have credentials? Do you have proof of concept or prototype or some credentials on that? We have built Clean Energy International Incubation Center in partnership with BIRAC, Government of India, Tata Power, and Tata Trust. And this will allow entrepreneurs to access what they need when it comes to prototyping or technology development work. But that is only one piece of the puzzle, right? We also have very deep, strong partnership with several grassroots organizations, especially in the areas in India where biomass is still primary fuel for cooking, whether it's Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand, or Northeast India. We provide access to people who are working with communities in these areas so that entrepreneurs can keep validating their hypothesis. We also provide seed capital so that one of the major requirement for building business is also taken care of. And we provide access to people like people in this panel and outside who have expertise in either science and technology or business management or entrepreneurship, so that entrepreneurs get a combination of technology, financial, mentoring, all kind of needs. And last but not the least, we build Social Alpha to provide hands-on entrepreneurial support to people, right? This is an organization which is run by ex-entrepreneurs and innovators themselves. So we provide them a lot of hands-on operating support, right? Helping them with the strategy, helping them with go-to-market planning, helping them with market access, etc. So that is what Social Alpha's approach has been, right? So we work with very early stage startups through incubation, helping them build their businesses, accelerating their ventures, and remain engaged with them as long as there is a need, right? So it's not a 6 months or 3 months acceleration program. It's a much longer engagement that we have with our startups. We started 5 years back, and some of our startups are still working with us, right? There are no more startups; they have become big companies, but we remain engaged. We remain engaged till they are tired of us, and they say, "Okay, we don't need you now. Leave us alone. We can run our business ourselves." We get out.
That's an important support. I mean, to see them through. Also, let me come to Simon also on the same question that Simon, you did mention that MECS will be supporting the program. So could you elaborate a little bit on that as well?
We also would like. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I mean we also would like to support entrepreneurs as you come up with this various solutions. I mean, if anything, we're looking to join with BIRAC in this partnership to get the entrepreneurship of India mobilized, which not just only solves your problems, but actually can then be taken to other locations and other places to help solve what is basically a global problem. Yeah, I think that's really important. However, because I got the floor, I just want to talk to Professor's point about cooking one day with electricity and the other 6 days with biomass. He's quite right, and that is important. And earlier, somebody said, I don't quite remember who, just things like cooking outside instead of inside a hut with no windows, and there are all sorts of things that could be done even with biomass. And the huge problem in rural areas is that people don't perceive that the wood is costing them anything. It may actually be costing their health. It may actually be costing women's violence, all sorts of things, but they don't see that. But again, I come back to the services. If we offer them something that they can pick up and drop, pick up and drop, then actually as their health improves, as their situation improves, then they can pick it up more and more. And last point on health, non-communicable diseases, COVID only really kills when you have an underlying health condition. And unfortunately, all this smoke is just creating non-communicable diseases, which are just setting all the poor up for a real devastating effect of COVID. Thank you.
So now that we have just about 3 minutes to go, can I do a quick round of comments? Simon, you already took your round. But let me go through the other speakers and take a quick round of one last comment or statement, which will help the entrepreneurs think about the challenge, think about the sector, or prepare themselves. Dr. Ambuj Sagar, would you have any last comment?
Yeah, thanks. I think I want to just re-emphasize one last point, which is, I guess I want to pick up on what Priyadarshini was saying about having multiple solutions and there being no single endpoint. And I think that's probably true in many ways. But I do think that in the end, I mean the line that Manoj used, which is the line I like to use, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And first and foremost, the problem we're trying to solve is a health problem. And so while there may be a plurality of solutions, there is a target, which is cooking that protects people's health. There are a lot of electrical implements in my house, but I don't think I would accept an electrical implement that actually may give me a chance of electrocuting me. So safety is built into every one of my devices. The same way, I think we can totally look for different kinds of cooking solutions based on your culture, your local requirements, all of that, and that's all fine. But below all of that, underneath all of that, if you're not protecting people's health, I think we've failed in the most fundamental part of this challenge, and therefore I want to just emphasize that this is not health to me is non-fungible. You can't replace that with other things. Yes, you can't protect health if you don't get the right user experience because people will not buy my stove or use my stove. But you don't want a stove that gives them a great user experience, but that doesn't protect their health. So health to me is not something that you can actually change and replace with anything else. That is a given, and everything else that actually is stuff you need to think about. So in the end, while it's called a clean cooking challenge, I think we must understand that it's fundamentally a health challenge on which we can layer on lots of other very, very creative thinking.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ambuj Sagarji. Dr. Nitin Labhasetwar, any last comments? Probably one-line statement, something like that.
Yeah, I'll continue with what Ambuj just said. And if health is a priority, we should not only look into the emissions, which normally we do. In our neighborhood approach, we always say that we should also look into the exposure. Okay. So I would like to challenge the entrepreneur and innovators that why not a 200 rupees chimney with the 2000 rupees cook stove, and combination of that we have seen ourselves makes a lot of difference. Okay. And second quickie is we should not only talk about the rural solution, we want to address the people, the rural people. I mean, according to my experience, what is more important, there also exists three different layers, economic layers. Okay, there are rich, rural, which have access to everything, and the middle income group and the poor. Okay, most probably you need to address the challenges of poorest among poor of the rural. Okay, because otherwise, barring few inaccessible areas like aspirational district, now LPG is accessible to the rural rich people.
Great, thank you. Priyadarshini, any last comments?
Yeah. My suggestion to the entrepreneurs, and I'm actually building on what Ambuj was saying, what you need to do is don't start with thinking that I want to design a biomass stove or an electric stove or something like that. Look at your target community. Understand what kind of thermal energy requirements they have. That will create your performance framework. Now within that framework you have to innovate to achieve the health and climate change benefit. So and you have the freedom to play with a wide variety of options as far as energy source is concerned, which I think is a very interesting feature of this challenge. You can even think of hybridizing two different energy sources together, or hybridizing two different type of stoves together to achieve the desired impact. So there is a huge scope for innovating here, thinking outside the box, but keeping in mind that you have to achieve a certain performance framework with the maximum possible, ideal possible health and climate change benefit to be delivered with no constraint on what energy sources you can combine, what technologies you can combine, and all of that. So I think it's I hope that many people will take up this challenge, and we will see a lot of interesting designs come up.
Great. Manoj, last for you. Any specific comments? I think investor perspective
Just
is very important.
just one sentence, just one thing I would like to say to all the entrepreneurs and innovators who are listening to this panel, that if we are talking about clean cooking in 2020, uh, this seems to be a really big problem that has not been solved yet. And if you are creating the right solution, it's not a small market. You will be creating a new market. So these are market creating innovations that you would do, and therefore the size is very large because you are creating solution that's scalable to millions of households. So don't underestimate the potential of business success if you solve this problem. And only I believe entrepreneurs can only solve this problem because they have skin in the game. So take up this challenge and do it.
Great. Thank you so much, Manoj. So, thank you once again, all the panelists, for sparing time. Let me hand it over back to Smita. Smita, sorry, I've eaten up on some of your time. All back to you now.
Not a problem at all. In fact, thank you, Adwait, and thank you all the panelists.